The 10 funniest movies ever made. Number 10, The Hangover. A classic of modern Hollywood comedy, The Hangover saw direction by American filmmaker Todd Phillips, who picked up recent traction with critics thanks to his entry into the psychological thriller subgenre Joker. But before he helmed the project based on the DC Comics character, Todd Phillips was among the foremost comedy directors the industry had to offer. Before the film at hand, Phillips made hilarious romps such as Road Trip, Old School, and Starsky and Hutch. But by far and away, The Hangover is the funniest of the bunch. Starring Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Zach Galifianakis, its well-known plot follows their three protagonists as they wake up in Las Vegas without their fourth friend, Doug, who is soon to be married. This movie takes the plot of having a crazy night out and cranks it up to 11. Number 9, Shrek. An animated film from DreamWorks, this is one of the most famous films of the 21st century thanks to a rock-solid script, an engrossing style of animation, and some seriously solid efforts from its ensemble voice cast. Of course, Mike Myers provides his dulcet intonations as the titular character here in Shrek, an ogre who must venture to rescue Princess Fiona from the clutches of a dragon in order to convince Lord Farquaad to return him control of his swamp. And he's joined by a devout companion and donkey who's famously voiced by Eddie Murphy. Other performers include Cameron Diaz as Fiona and John Lithgow as Farquaad, and of course, the film was so hilarious through and through that it spawned a massive film franchise full of sequels and spin-offs. There's no denying its inclusion on the list. Number 8, Airplane. American actor Leslie Nielsen was once deemed by film critic Roger Ebert as the Oliver of spoofs, with hilarious performances under his belt in stints such as the Naked Gun franchise. But with the project at hand, Airplane, Abrahams, and Zucker in their directorial debuts poke fun at the disaster film genre. Its plot is rather famous as the crew of the titular vessel becomes sick, forcing an ex-fighter pilot to land the passengers safely. And it's replete with hilarious puns and running gags, with Nielsen's protagonist completely unaware of the absurdity taking place around him. There's a reason it's considered one of the funniest films ever made. Number 7, Hot Fuzz. Directed by Edgar Wright, the second entry in his Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy is arguably the funniest of the bunch. Sure, Shaun of the Dead gives it a great run for its money in that regard, but the dynamic duo of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost show up under Wright's direction in frankly funnier fashion here in Hot Fuzz. Its plot focuses on the two leads, police officers in a West Country village in England as they investigate the mysterious murders that have been taking place. And the result is a hilariously satiric take on the buddy cop genre, going down as a clear choice for the list on just about any day. Number 6, Bridesmaids. Director Paul Feig has worked in various genres since bursting onto the Hollywood scene with a drama called I Am David. He's also put out films such as A Simple Favor, a crime thriller, along with The School for Good and Evil, a fantasy film. But without a doubt, the funniest film of his career would have to be Bridesmaids, written by Annie Mamolo and Kristen Wiig. Of course, it stars Wiig as the protagonist, Annie Walker, who experiences a series of difficulties upon agreeing to be the maid of honor at her best friend Lillian's wedding. The latter is played by Maya Rudolph, with other stars in Bridesmaids including Rose Byrne, Wendy McClendon-Covey, Ellie Kemper, and Melissa McCarthy. And they all perform just brilliantly. Number 5, The Big Lebowski. Off the bat, it's worth noting the hilarious and convincing efforts from its star-studded cast. Not just Jeff Bridges as Jeffrey the Dude Lebowski, but others such as John Goodman, Steve Buscemi, Julianne Moore, John Turturro, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. They all take part in some of the most outrageous scenes you're ever likely to see on screen. But their performances were also convincing through and through, with Joel and Ethan Coen behind the camera directing their actors every step of the way. Complete with well-known one-liners, iconic character design, and a famous trip scene that depicts hallucinatory effects, The Big Lebowski has it all. The Coen brothers have several funny features under their belt, but this cult classic tops the rest. Its devout following would have rioted if it weren't included on the list. Number 4, Blazing Saddles. One of the 2 Mel Brooks films on the list, Blazing Saddles, tells the story of a frontier town called Rock Ridge, which is about to be demolished to make room for a new railroad. Cleavon Little stars as a railroad worker named Bart, who becomes the first black sheriff of the aforementioned town. But this of course also features Gene Wilder in his second of 3 total collaborations with director Mel Brooks. And for some fans, this is their most iconic work together. Blazing Saddles received 3 Academy Award nominations upon release, and it's since been selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry. Those are some high honors for a comedy, and well earned with regard to Blazing Saddles. Number 3. Young Frankenstein. A comedic spin on the literary character created by Mary Shelley, and like the last Brooks entry on the list, Young Frankenstein defines the category of comedy like few pieces of cinema that have come before or after, taking genre tropes and turning them into some of the funniest jokes you'll ever hear. And thanks to some surprisingly solid efforts from its cast in tandem with ongoing well-timed jokes, like with the mispronunciation of the titular character's famous last name, Young Frankenstein stands out as a career-defining project from everyone involved. On any given day, it could end up even higher on the list. Number 2. Monty Python Holy Grail. Whether they've avoided it due to the silliness of its plots, or they've viewed it ad nauseum to laugh at its timeless jokes, audiences around the world are familiar with Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's a spoof on the fantasy adventure stories of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, with Graham Chapman starring as Arthur as he quests for the titular Grail. For those unfamiliar, Monty Python had been a comedic group before this feature film thanks to their television show Flying Circus, one of the first sketch comedy shows ever made. But this is what truly put them on the map, with the scene featuring the Black Knight, for instance, nearly transcending the entire medium. If you're a film fan that can cite the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow, you know the spot for Holy Grail in the top 5 is justified. Number 1. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, one of the most legendary filmmakers to ever live, this entry isn't just considered among the funniest films ever made, it's also widely known as one of the greatest films of all time, regardless of genre, region, or director. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards upon release and has since been selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry. Pretty impressive stats. For those unaware, its plot follows a United States Air Force general in a somewhat deranged mental state as he preemptively orders a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. And while you may not expect a plot of that kind to facilitate the most laugh-out-loud style of comedy, rest assured that Dr. Strangelove deserves this spot on the list.